One day I was studying this, hadn't met both yet. This was a long time before. It was probably maybe late 70s, 76, 77, 78, somewhere around in there. And I was living in a communal house in Boulder, Colorado. And I was studying the geometries every day, trying to understand all of what this was all about. And one day the angels came in, and what they do is when they teach me these things, they make like a hologram in the room, and I can see it. And I just sort of look at this like this three-dimensional hologram in the room, and I can study it and try to understand what it's about. So one day they made this hologram in the room of a square and a circle that looked like that. It was the first time that I have any conscious recollection of being able to I've ever seen that square and the circle before in that particular relationship. And so they had me look at it, and I looked at it, and then they said, "Do you see it?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Okay, your job now is to find that relationship in Metatron's cube." And then they left. And I actually thought at the moment when they left, because they always give me those little things, and usually I figure them out pretty quick, and then I go on to the next one. And when they gave me that, I figured, well, okay, I'll do it in a few hours here, or maybe I'll get it by tomorrow. And I started working on it, and I couldn't find it, and it just kept going. Days went by, and weeks went by, and months started going by, and I was sitting there, and I was getting really frustrated. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out where that relationship was inside of those circles. I tried every conceivable thing that I could think of. Of course, I didn't have 12 lines in there, which might have made a difference, but it still didn't. It wasn't where it was at anyway, so it wouldn't have made any difference even if I did have the proper Metatron's cube. And one day the angels interceded directly, which they don't usually do in my life, but they have a few times. And this was one of them. I was sitting with this stuff late at night with patterns all over the floor, and nobody knew what I was doing, by the way. This is very secret in my life. I didn't discuss this with anyone, maybe once in a while, but it was really rare. No one really knew. This is sort of a thing that I was doing, and it just was, I was driven to do it. Nobody even cared anyway, so it didn't really make any difference. And nobody cared about this stuff. And so one day, I've got it all over the floor, and I'm trying to find the circle and the square in this thing, and I get a knock on the door. So I open the door up, and here's somebody standing there I've never seen before in my whole life. This tall, kind of this guy. And he says, sorry, he said he was sorry to bother me and everything else like that, but that he had been sent there from his group to talk to me and to tell me about the circle and the square. And I just kind of looked at him, and he told me, I don't think he even told me his name. I just sort of grabbed him and pulled him in the room. Sit down. If you know anything about a circle and a square, I don't want to listen about this stuff. And he said he was sent there right from the Masons, that they had told him that he had to come to, they had given him my address and everything, and told him to come to me. And so this drawing here was his. I didn't draw this. The very first thing he did is he made a square on the page. And the second thing he did is he made the circle. Before he ever even started, and I went, oh, there it is. That's it. That's the one. And then he started making all these fancy lines all over the place. He divided it into like this, and then he drew a diamond around here, like that. And then he drew from that point up to the circle and back and down to the circle and back, like that. And then he did something that I didn't quite understand at the time. He drew this line that was here, he drew a parallel line up to there. And this line here, he drew a parallel line down, and he reflected this to this one in the same way, forming this pattern like that. By the rules that I had understood, that's cheating. That doesn't. You can't play that game because these points don't go anywhere. Everything has to go to defined places that you can geometrically mark, and you don't have to measure or anything else like that. And these don't go anywhere, you know. So anyway, I had a real problem with that when he started talking about it. And so he said the secret to this whole thing is that the perimeter of the square has to equal the circumference of the circle. For those of you who have read Taoism and a lot of the Lao Tzu and stuff, the whole thing about circling the square and squaring the circle, you probably heard this before in poems and everything else. It's all trying to get the geometry so that the two equal each other. And life is constantly trying to deal with this relationship in so many ways, on biological levels and everything else. At least in retrospect, I know that. I didn't know that then. And then he began to tell me that this created something called the phi ratio, which I wrote up in here before, of this ratio of phi, which equals phi, and this ratio is 1.618, is what it's usually approximated at, because what comes after that is 0.339, but this amount here, since this is 0 plus a tiny bit, is so small that they just eliminate that. And they approximate it at 1.618. I didn't know what this meant. I didn't have any idea what that was at that time. But he talked about it and how that it was a proportion in life and how important it was. He spent about 2 hours telling me how important it was. And he said that all the lines in here were all broken up into the phi ratio. Now what the phi ratio is if you were to take this little rod that I have in my hand here, there's an infinite number of places you could cut it in, but there's only 2 that you could cut it or bend it in. That would be the phi ratio, and one would be here, and one would be approximately here. Those would be the 2 places, real close. The human can zero right into that. Humans can, for example, pick the center of a circle better than most mechanical things can, just by going like that. Because we can intuit it. If this was the rod, again, we could either pick here or there, approximately where the phi ratio is. Now, depending on which direction you're coming from. Now, this is what I mean by that. If you're coming from, say, this direction, and this is the phi ratio here, this will create a mathematical proportion such that if this segment is A, and this segment is B, and the whole thing is C, then it's a ratio such that A divided by B is proportionate to B divided by C. It's just a simple relationship. And it creates this mathematical formula. No matter how big or long, you can get something 12 miles long, you're going to cut it at a certain place, and the miles and everything will divide. It doesn't matter if it's inches or centimeters or whatever it is. It doesn't make any difference what your yardstick is. It's always going to be the same. Okay. Well, if you had never heard about the phi ratio, you would not have any idea how much you are immersed in the phi ratio. There's so many places that it would not be possible. This is literally true. There's so many places in the body that it would not be possible for someone to count them all in their lifetime. If they were counting every single day of their lives for the rest of their lives. You couldn't do it. Wouldn't be possible because there's at least 100 trillion cells and it's all through those. So not counting all the places throughout the rest of the body and everything else, it's just phenomenal where God has used this same particular ratio. He then brought in Leonardo's drawing with a square in the circle around it, which I had not really thought much about before. And he talked about that somewhat. And then then he drew this compass and this square and this eye of somebody. It doesn't look like the right eye of horse. The right eye of horse has these three lines that go. It's Egyptian. It's very different. That looks like a real person's eye kind of there. And then he left. I never saw him ever since the rest of my life. But my life's not over with, so who knows? He may show up. After he left, he didn't tell me the answer, but after he left, I got it. Somewhere along the line, I got it. And I realized that Metatron's cube is really a three-dimensional object. Being three-dimensional, you could rotate it and look at Metatron's cube from a different view. And so when you do that, if you rotate Metatron's cube to this view, it becomes square rather than hexagonal. Once it's in there like that, just taking the center part of Metatron's cube out, which is really the egg of life, just this four little cells up like that. Well, first of all, it's in a cube, so you could put a perfect cube that would fit around here. And it has the zona pellucida around it, which is a sphere. And so the very nature of this eight-cell division is that there is a sphere around it and a cube around it. And the cube is such that it points precisely to where the 16-cell division goes. And that looked like what they were showing me. But according to this guy from Mason's, the key is that the perimeter had to equal the circumference. And so I spent several more years trying to calculate and finally came up with, son of a gun, it doesn't work. But then I remembered that that's the inner surface of the zona pellucida. There's two circles that go around the flower of life. And if you go to the outer surface of the zona pellucida, bingo, it hits a near perfect phi ratio, right on. It's contained, this relationship of the square, circling the square and squaring the circle is contained in the original 8 cells of life. And from there, many, many, many things begin to unfold very rapidly for me from there. From now on, whenever you see a square with 4 circles in it like that, we are always talking about the egg of life, okay? Cell division. So here's these 4 circles. I then tried to draw in these other patterns just to see kind of what it would look like over that, superimpose it to see if I can find a thing. And again, this doesn't seem to appear to go difference. And that's a very, very small amount between the arm length and the height. And that 1/10,000th of an inch is not a mistake. It is part of the Fibonacci sequence. Which you'll see later. It's built in. It's part of it. And so we have this squareness or cubeness around us. And look where the center of that square field is. Exactly here at the base of the spine. Which happens to be where this other little square sits. Of these 8 cells. Centered in the center of this cube is a tiny cube with this big cube out around the outside of us. This is what I mean by we grow radially out from those original 8 cells. The lines from the original 8 cells, from my way of seeing, 55 feet right from the moment of conception, right moment that it gets to this level here, you've got a field, even on a baby, that's going to be 27.5 feet out there approximately, all the way around it. The lines and everything are extended out there. The whole thing's there. And then we start growing just like a crystal along the lines. If you put your legs out like this and your arms out like that, there will be a perfect sphere that will fit around the body, or a circle, either one. But its center will be at the navel, not at the base of the spine. The center of this one is right here. You can see if you look at the circle how I'm aiming into the center of that circle. though the science behind navels is pretty interesting. I'll leave that for just a little bit more to discuss that, but it's not as straightforward as it looks. So, and when that happens, the square and the circle, hit exactly on the floor. If you were to take the circle, center of the circle, and move it down to the center of the square, this would move exactly halfway, and the whole thing would have that image that you saw in the first place. The square, the perimeter of the square that fits around the human body, and the circumference of the circle that fits around the human body, of this particular body, is almost identical. And I can prove that mathematically in a little bit. It's almost exactly the same. Almost is part of the game here. We got to wait a little bit to see what this almost is all about. There's no mistakes in the geometry of life at all. None there. Everything is flawless. It all runs right down there. And soon we're going to see that all these lines that Leonardo drew on the body, you see the line at the wrists and here and across the neck and here and across the knees and everything, and the face is broken up in all these lines. These all have deep meaning. And this man obviously knew about what I'm about to discuss, and I'll be able to pretty clearly show to you that that's true. Only we're just beginning to get into what this is all about. But Leonardo was right on top of all of this a long time ago. This thing about phi ratio again, which we still don't really know what it's all about yet. According to Thoth, as above, so below. He was the one that said that, by the way. And the human body is the measuring stick of the universe and the fields of the body. It measures the macrocosm as well as the microcosm. Anything that you need to know on any level of existence whatsoever is contained in the human field. It's the open book of all that is. And so anything you want to know should be there, and one of the main things is this phi ratio thing should be in the very proportions of the human body. And where that is located in is if you've got a square around here with a line down the middle, right? And if you drew the line that divided the body in half down the middle, and then you drew a diagonal from there to there, that line that comes down as a diagonal and then goes over there, the bend in it is mathematically exactly the phi ratio. It could not be any more perfect. It's not even possible. Here is the square around the body and the line down the middle, and this is that diagonal that would go up to this imaginary corner up there. If you just use one edge as 1, that's your measuring stick, then this divides this into 1/2 and 1/2. So you got that right away. And what you're looking for is C. And this will be B, and this one over here will be A. And since, remember that ratio that I showed over there, A divided by B is going to be equal to B divided by A plus B, or B divided by C. Now C is simply, what I've done here is I've taken a line like that, a compass, and ruled this out like that. So this B is the same as this B, and so you've got a line of A and B, and the whole line is C. And so you've got A divided by B is proportionate to B divided by A plus B, or proportionate to B plus divided by C. We also know, because of Pythagoras lived, he said that B squared equals this side squared plus this side squared, and this side is A, so you have B squared equals A squared plus 1 squared. A squared we know is 1/2, and 1 squared is 1, and 1/2 squared is 1/4, so B squared equals 5/4, or B equals the square root of 5 divided by 2. So this equals the square root of 5 divided by 2. And we know another simple equation is that C equals A plus B. And C is what we're looking for here. And if you take A, which is 1/2, and B, which is the square root of phi divided by 2, so C equals 1/2 plus the square root of phi divided by 2. Just try it. Take that formula. Take that formula and put it into your computer. Just take 0.5 plus square root of phi divided by 2. It's a simple equation. Put it into any little computer and watch what happens. It'll go 1.618 and it'll go until it runs out of computer chips. It will never go to, if you got a lot of computer chips in there, you better wait a while, because that thing's going to really be going like this. Try to find an in, and won't ever find an in. It hit it right on the nail. Exactly. Right on the nail. That is how you get to that, and it's in the human proportions. So here's the human body with this line down the middle and this diagonal coming up here. Well, if you were to draw a line from the navel straight across here over to this point, parallel again, from here to here, another one of those no-nos. This is not my drawing originally. This is someone else's. First thing is that these two lines cross exactly at the phi ratio. This line is broken into the phi ratio. This line is broken into the phi ratio, creating we haven't talked about it yet, but this is a golden triangle, and this is a golden triangle, and this big one is a golden triangle, creating this same pattern. And this line from the top of the head to the navel, from the navel to the bottom of the feet, is also broken in the phi ratio, which means the top of the body relative to the bottom of the body from the navel is in the phi ratio. Though it's a little more complex than that, and people have studied this in great detail, when a baby is born, the navel is in the dead center, shouldn't use that word, is in the precise center of the baby. So it's right in the center of the baby. But as the baby starts growing, if it's it goes up, it starts heading toward phi ratio, and it goes above it, and then below it, and above it, and below it, and above it, and below it, and starts zeroing in, getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to phi ratio as the child gets older and older and older and approaches adult. And a female, I believe, ends up with the navel is above the phi ratio, and the male ends up with it slightly below. And you got to average the two, and you get the phi ratio. This is what the computers have found. So it's even more amazing than just saying it's the phi ratio. And but it's not just the top half of the body and the phi ratio, the bottom half of the body, as you're about to see. It's really a much more complex situation. Taking the finger, for example, every bend in your body is in the phi ratio. If you take this bone compared to this bone, that's in the phi ratio. This bone is in the phi ratio to this one, and this one's in the phi ratio to this one. And all the bones running through your hands and your feet are all bent exactly at the phi ratio. The length of your hand compared to this bone, that bends at the phi ratio. And this bone, relative to this bone, bends at the phi ratio. The length of your foot to this one, and the length of this bone to this one, etc., all the way up through. In fact, it's all your bones are all in the phi ratio, running through your whole body. And even things that you wouldn't normally think about. You probably never saw this before, though you may have wondered about it. And we haven't talked about the golden mean spiral, though we will in a minute. I always forget to use this one. You take your hand like this, and you go like this, and watch. Can you see that ratio? They move in the golden mean spiral as they move. It's actually a Fibonacci spiral. You can see the spiraling like an nautilus shell that happens in there. If you even do things like do something real unusual like this, where you connect the centers of each one of your fingertips in this zigzag pattern, each one of these bends are in a phi ratio as they go down there like that. So it's emerged throughout your whole body, but in all kinds of ways. The sizes of organs relative to the size of other organs, and the sizes in the cells, the sizes of nuclei to other things. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's somewhat redundant. Now, the ancients were well aware of this. The Greeks, Egyptians, Chinese, all of them from a long time ago, they understood this relationship in life. And so this, by the way, is another way to show a phi ratio. In other words, instead of showing a straight line with a dot on it, if you were going to show a bunch of phi ratios, all you'd have is a bunch of dots on a line. So another way to do it is have a curve like this, showing where it crosses at the phi ratio. And this way you can see all the curves at one time and see where one came from to the next one. This came out of The Power of Limits by, I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry, Dorksy Jones. Does anybody know how to pronounce his name? It's a book called The Power of Limits, and it's a very, very, very good book on sacred geometry. And here you can see how they have the navel here, and they even showed it slightly above, which is accurate on this. And exactly where the nipples are forms another phi ratio in here. It forms a phi ratio with the knees. All your various points in your body. And this is just a few. You can just keep going on and on and on and on and on. And but the point I want to make here is the Greeks, when they understood this, they created architecture and all of their arts using both sides of their brain simultaneously. They used the left side, their logical male side, that when they were making this sculpture, they carefully measured all the lengths of everything. There was no intuitiveness, none, absolutely zero. Everything was used carefully measured. But at the same time, they used their creative side, their feminine creative side, to decide exactly how he's going to be standing and where he's looking and what he's going to feel like and what kind of smile he's got and all these other kinds of things on his face. Which created, and the unity between the left and the right side of the brains in this kind of way, created an art form that is stupendous. The Greek sculpture is incredible. And yet the Romans that came in directly behind them did not know anything for many, many, many years later until the Italian Renaissance, did not know about this mathematics that was behind the sculpture and their buildings and everything else that they had, like the Greek Parthenon. They didn't know about that. And all they saw was these amazing statues and amazing artwork. Even the bowls, where the bowls come in and where the art's laid out on it and the sizes of them and everything was all in sacred geometry. And so when the Romans tried to do this, they just tried to copy it. They tried to intuit it, the feelings of this stuff. And some of them got very good, like Michelangelo, but at that point, I actually think, by that time he already knew. He knew about sacred geometry. But in the beginnings, when they first took over, they didn't. And you look at the initial stages of Roman art relative to Greek art, and forget it. They're not even close, man. It doesn't have anything even close to the type of feel that was in the Greek art. But this proportions of life, called the phi ratio, is not just in the human structure. It's in all life. Everything, bugs and plants and trees and relationship of planets and orbits and everything else. It's in all of it. It ties down into electrons and everything else. But even in here, you can see the relationships. This is not a real good one, but the length of the body compared to the size of the wings and everything else. And if you were really going to get into it, where the dots are located and everything else, is all phi ratio stuff. This one is a dragonfly, and the length of each tail segment coming in here is all in these cascading phi ratios over here. And then they didn't get into it, but the bend in every one of the legs and arms, and the size of the head this way relative to it this way. Even the overall structure, like we have a square that fits around us, and this is a rectangle that fits around that. All of your the external fields that fit around all of the geometrical forms are all going to be functions of this. Now ours is directly, it's a square, but there's the square, there's the diamond, There's the diamond field this way, which is a rectangle, the diamond field this way, which is a rectangle. There's a hexagonal field that goes this way, and there's another one that fits up over this way. And the outer fields are all going to be directly associated with those, or functions of them, meaning additions, multiplications, divisions of those shapes. And this is a frog skeleton. And you can see here where they've shown that all the divisions inside the frog bone are all broken down in these very strict mathematics. It's not just at random. There's no randomness. And this one is fish, which I chose this one because there's so many different kinds of fish that it's hard to imagine that they can all be purely mathematical. They really do seem to be non-mathematical, but they're really not. The location of where once a shape takes place, then that once an outer body shape takes place, it very rapidly determines everything else. Where the fin is going to be located and how high and long, and all these kind of things will be determined. There's only certain shapes that can. Once you make one line, then you have predetermined a lot of other lines. In fact, they're all forms are probably holographic. I say that because of some of the work of Lucy de Lubitz later on, which I'll show you what some of the things she did. She took I'll actually show you the photograph of this. She was at the Karnak Temple in Egypt, and there was this big pile of rocks that they had gathered up that had been thrown all over the place when this place was destroyed. It was a temple. The Romans came in and really wrecked things up. And all these rocks were just all broken up in pieces. They knew they were from the same temple because they were an unusual kind of rock. They were different than anything else there. But it's just a big pile of rocks, so they just piled them up in this big pile. And Lucy came up and just picked up one of these rocks that was in good shape and measured it, went back and made a drawing of what the temple was going to look like, the whole thing. And they took the drawing and put it together. And when you see it a little later, you won't believe that would have been possible. But it did, and she did it on another temple too. That's when I really began interested in her work. She was an amazing person. But we'll have to wait till a little later to see that. I shouldn't have told you that at the right time. This is Chinese. And again, the Chinese understood this clearly. This is a real building, and again, every little, like where this line was, where this line was, and this one, relative to each of all the other ones, and the total height compared to any of the other aspects of this is all based on sacred geometry and primarily the phi ratio. And if you really got in here and you looked at the height of the doors and the width of the doors and how far the doors were apart and how far the edge of the door was to the edge of the wall and all this kind of stuff, you would see this incredible sacred geometry going on and throughout all of that. And what it does is it gives you this funny feeling when you look at it. All this geometry that's around the world is based on this. When you look at it, it just feels like looking at a sunset or something. It feels like, well, I don't know exactly how to say it. This geometry has often been called the mathematics of beauty. Because when we see these kinds of things in form, we say, gee, that's beautiful.
This man did a study, and he had on Channel 13 these dancers all wear these black leotards, and on all of the joints they had white spots. And he had people watch the dance, and he had several different choreographers do something. And everybody basically agreed on certain dances as being really nice or pleasant to watch or comfortable. And when they put this onto a screen, it made geometric patterns with all the white things. And if it was one of the dances that everybody enjoyed, it all worked out mathematically. And if it was something that people said that just wasn't right about the dance, it didn't work out. And what they determined was that the mind does everything mathematically, and whether you like something or don't like it, whether you determine whether it's beautiful or not, is all based on the math. And they showed it through this. It was really cool. They showed it on the dance.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I agree with that. We do. I mean, everything we do is mathematical, though. At least everything from the left side of our brain is. We do have this freedom from the other side, which is not. But we also have a part of our brain, our male logical side, that is just like the female side is free and experiential also. Okay, there's another sacred form that is all over nature, everywhere. We live in one. The galaxy is in this big spiral. So where do spirals come from? There's spirals in sunflower seeds. There's spirals in the way that pine cone seeds are. Spirals in the nautilus shell. In fact, almost all seashells that you take out, you're going to see all these intimate spirals moving through them. Where does it come from? Okay, we're the measuring stick of the universe. It's got to be in our body. Always, no matter what you're looking for, you can look to yourself to find the answer. And here's that same shape around here. And remember I did this down there. Well, this form, which we derived straight out of the human body, all you got to do is connect this line to that line, and you get a form called the golden mean, or the golden mean rectangle, and which looks like this. This would have been the human body. This would be the diagonal, and this is the one that would come over here. You connect these together, and this is a golden mean rectangle. A golden mean rectangle is this, basically. You take the shorter edge of the rectangle, and you come down the same distance and form a square in it, based upon whatever this edge is. What's left over is another golden mean rectangle in proportion to this one, only face this way rather than this way. You take the shorter edge and make another square, and you have another golden mean rectangle. Take the shorter edge and make another square, and you have another golden mean rectangle. And another square, and another golden mean rectangle, and another square, and another golden mean square. And that will go on forever. And you can go out the other way. You can take the longer edge and make a square, and that's a bigger golden mean rectangle. And then you can take the longer edge and make another square, and that'll be another golden mean rectangle. So it'll go in forever, and it'll go out forever with no beginning and no end. And you have two primary lines of energy that move through this. If you take the diagonals across here, which is a square root of 2 triangle, across here, and the diagonal comes this way, and the diagonal, that is the male energy of a spiral. And if you take the arcing curve across here, and then here, and then here, and such, this is the female energy of a golden mean spiral. Both of them are there every time at once. You usually see in nature the female part of it that manifests, though it isn't always true. A good example of that is the bismuth crystal. The bismuth crystal looks just like this. That's how its shape is. It's the male part of the spiral, but almost always it's the female part of the spiral that is formed. And if you take the diagonals of a golden mean rectangle, from this point to this one, to this diagonal, and there's another one that I didn't draw on here from here, they will locate the exact center. Well, this shape is real important in life too. It's a logarithmic curve. It has been said by other sacred geometry people that if you take from the navel and draw a line across the imaginary square around there, that this is a golden mean rectangle around there. And it's been said that you would then be able to draw a golden mean rectangle around, or logarithmic spiral that would come around, and it would focus exactly on the diagonal going from here to here. I believe that's almost true. And I'll have to explain in a moment what I mean. I personally do not believe that there are any logarithmic spirals in existence. naturally forming. And I'll have to explain myself here in a moment. But this is real close to the truth. And that if you were to take this line here, this one here that forms a square, and continue it up, then that's another one. It's another golden mean rectangle, or close to it. And then if you took this line over here, that's another one. And if you continued that around, you'd find that there are 8 of them. There are 8 of these logarithmic golden mean rectangles around the human body, associated with the 8 possible diagonals. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 possible diagonals, and there are 8 golden mean rectangles that spiral around the body, where these 8 spiraling forms of energy come and terminate in these 8 places around the body in this pattern, right around the original 8 cells that are located in the precise center of that pattern. Leonardo drew these lines on the body, and if you drew the lines down from where he put them on there, it forms this primary grid where it shows these 4 places in the middle and these 8 places around the outer edge, which happen to be the squares where the 8 primary spirals come in and focus in on. If you complete that grid totally, you would find that it's a grid of 64 squares, and which has a direct relationship to the I Ching and a lot of other things, and the DNA molecule and other stuff. But I'm going to stop that just for a moment and come back and address something, and that is this statement that I made that I don't believe that it was a logarithmic spiral. A logarithmic spiral is an irrational number, as we showed before. It has no end, and it is a spiral that has no beginning and no end. And it's something it's elusive. You can't get it all. Can't get a hold of the whole thing. And this whole thing of having no beginning and no end is very, very hard for us as humans to deal with. We have the part in us that can deal with something that has no end. That's pretty easy. But we have a real hard, at least I do, I have a really hard time with something that has no beginning. Just think about it. Think about something that has no beginning. You go. You can go on forever once it's started, but once it isn't. But it's hard because we are geometrical in nature, and which always has a center. And if we can't find a center, our mind just doesn't know how to deal with that. Well, that's because it's an irrational number. It's irrational. And so what life has done is really ingenious. I mean, it is the most brilliant thing that I've ever seen. That life has figured out a way to get around this problem. It's like God said to life, okay, do this thing that's impossible. And we said, it's impossible. And we said, oh, but I know a way. I know how I can do this. And this is what happened. There was a man named Leonardo Fibonacci. He was a little bit almost contemporary with Leonardo da Vinci, a couple hundred years before. And he was an interesting person. He was kind of a monk type that used to walk through forests and everything to relax in the forest, right brain stuff. But at the same time, his left brain was clicking on all the time. And he kept noticing the mathematics of the plant life and everything around there. And as I understand it, it was this plant that triggered it. It's called a Sneezeworth plant. He probably smelled it and sneezed him, and it's never been the same sense or something. But what it was is he noticed the leaf pattern on it. A Sneezeworth plant comes up and has one leaf, and then it grows one more, and then it grows 2, and then it grows 3, and then 5, and then 8, and it has 13 flowers. There's that 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. And he wrote that down, and he started noticing, and these were the things he wrote down. He found out that lilies and of course there's lots and more examples than these, but this is what he got. Lilies and irises had 3 petals, and buttercups and larkspurs and columbines had 5, and sun dolphiniums had 8, corn marigolds had 13, some asters had 21, and daisies almost always had either 34, 55, or 89 petals. And he looked at that and he said, hey, there's something there. So we had this sequence of 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55. Again, we showed you this one once before, where if you add 3 to 5, you get 8, and 5 to 8, you get 13, and 8 and 13, you get 21, etc., like that. And that sequence became known as the Fibonacci or Fibonacci sequence, depending on how you want to say it. Here's an example of the hibiscus flower, which has 5 petals facing out this way, and the stamen comes out in 5 petals facing down the other way. Pentagon facing one way, pentagon facing the other way. Of course, when we look at plants, we don't really think of them as being geometrical, but they are. And this is what life did to solve the problem. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 5, 89, 1, 2, 3, 5, 13, 21. I'll go this far on it. Remember this number of the phi equals 1.618. We'll go that far on it. And look what happens when you divide the one term into the previous term. If you divide 1 into 1, it equals 1. Now 1 is a lot smaller than this number. And if you divide 1 into 2, you get 2, which is a lot bigger than this number. If you divide 2 into 3, you get 1.5, which is smaller than this number. If you divide 3 into 5, you get 1.66, I believe. Yes, which is greater. If you divide 5 into 8, you get 1.60, which is under the number. 8 into 13 is 1.625, which is slightly smaller, greater. 13 into 21 is 1.615, just under. 21 into 34 is 1.619, just over. 34 into 55, 1.6176, just under. 55 into 89, 1.6181, just over. 89 to 144, 1.617975. 44 into 233, 1.61805. It's called, in mathematics, it's called asymptotically reaching a limit. It will just keep getting closer and closer and closer and closer as the numbers increase. It'll never reach it, but it'll get so close, you can't tell them apart. You can't see it. And so when you look at things in life, like, for example, well, I'll show you an example in a moment. This will be a geometrical a view of what you're doing. Here's these 4 places that around the human body. Remember those 4 spots we talked about in the basis? And there's 8 squares around it. We're going to pick one like that one right there. And we're going to take the diagonal across one of those little squares and use that as our measuring stick. And we're going to call it 1. And so the diagonal that goes across that little square there will be 1. And then turn 90 degrees and go to the next term. 1. Turn 90 degrees and the next term is 2. So you go 2 diagonals. And then 3. Then 5, then 8, then 13, then 21, then 34, then 55, then 89. And you can see this spiral coming out, which will look just like that. This is the inside of a nautilus shell with this incredible precision moving out from there, this spiral that comes out like this. And each one of these chambers is more and more and more accurate in the creation of the spiral. But if you remember over here, in the beginning, as you go back toward the beginning, it gets less and less and less accurate, right? I mean, in the beginning, it's 1 and 2, I mean, which is way off, way under, and then closer. Look what happens when you go way back into the center. Can you see these first 3 ones? The first one came over here and hit the edge and bent. The next one came around and bent over because it wasn't even aimed right. And then 3 came out like that. And it wasn't until the 4th one that it started to fit properly, which is the closest. And it keeps getting. It actually was the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th one where it started getting close, which is down here. It just starts to begin to approximate. And so if you looked at this, you would think that the nautilus shell made a mistake there in the beginning. You think, well, the guy didn't know what he's doing there. And mommy didn't know what he's doing when she made. This is an egg shell. It's for a squid that lives inside here. And the mommy creates this shell, and the nautilus blows gas through these little tubes that causes the shell to rise and come up to the surface where it feeds. And it sucks the gas out, and it sinks to incredible depths below. And it's really pretty ingenious. And then when it gets big enough, it leaves. It doesn't need the shell anymore, and it leaves and needs to come up and float up on the surface. So you can see the very mathematics going on. Well, there's no mistakes in here. This is exactly proper according to what we have figured out on how to make this spiral. So this spiral isn't a logarithmic spiral, though many books will tell you that it is. It isn't logarithmic. It's a Fibonacci spiral. It's different. And remember in Egypt they had those 2 spirals that came off, and one was Fibonacci and one was there. We're going to show that again. The difference between these 2 is very, very important in life. This is the pine cone, and you have spirals running this way around it, and you also have spirals running this way around it. You have 2 counter-rotating spirals, one going one way and one going the other. And if you counted all the spirals going one way, and then you counted all the spirals going the other way, I don't care if it's a daisy or a sunflower or this or any other pineapple, anything else, you'll find that it's always 2 sequential Fibonacci sequence numbers that determine how many spirals go one way and spirals go the other way. And this, geometrically, is the summation of what we were just talking about. Over here is the golden mean rectangle, and this is a Fibonacci rectangle. This edge is the same as this edge on both of them. And this is 1, and this is 1. Or this edge is 1, and this edge is 1. So these 2 squares are exactly the same. The difference lies in the part that's left over. In a Fibonacci one, it's just 2 more squares. But in a golden mean one, it's a little bit greater. Instead of being 0.5, it's 0.618. And so there's a difference of 0.118, this little tiny difference. And so as this one starts over here and goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, this one starts in here at some undefined place and comes out. And very, very quickly, you could not tell the 2 apart. Because this little tiny piece, geometrically, gets smaller and smaller and smaller, proportionate to the squares that get bigger and bigger and bigger. In other words, this square here, that proportion of 0.118 is very big. You see how much of it is, relative to the line, that's a big piece. Here's the same amount relative to this square, and that's a lot smaller. Relative to this square, that little piece is even smaller. And so what happens is that little piece is fixed, and it just goes to 0. You wouldn't think it, but from the Egyptian point of view, this is real important in understanding resurrection. The very chamber The king's chamber, which many people said is a golden mean rectangle, is not. It is two perfectly equal squares. And the height of the king's chamber is 1/2 the diagonal. And this is all Fibonacci sequence stuff. This king's chamber, the sarcophagus sits over here, the inner end over here like this. And these proportions are not golden mean, they're Fibonacci. Because that was the key. It was the real key to, the very shape of the room was the key to what they were doing in there. You'll see when we get to that part of it. So this has no beginning and no end. This has a very, very definite beginning, but it doesn't necessarily have to have an end. And that's who we are. That's why we have a problem with something that has no beginning. So, is there any questions on this one statement? Yeah.
My question on that is that with the golden mean, doesn't that mean that it connects itself at one end? Somewhere or another along the line, if it doesn't have a beginning and an end, then it loops. Have you thought along those lines?
Well,
it's not in this dimension. I know that.
You can think along those lines, and that may be true. That would be a mathematical, theoretical approach to it. But purely from a geometrical image of the eye, if you have a vortex, that vortex can rotate in that direction forever, and it can go in forever. Absolutely forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Of course, all space is curved. And so you could probably come up with some kind of mathematics that might support that idea. But I'm not looking at it like that. But I could see what you're saying. But like the electromagnetic fields are the same way. They are all looping patterns, but they do not bend back on themselves. It's like red light and purple light don't meet. Red has a long wavelength, purple has a short wavelength, and instead of meeting, the purple goes into ultraviolet light and just transmutes into something different. And red light doesn't come from purple, but it comes from infrared. And so I don't know, but I hear what you're saying. But all I can say is I don't know. Yeah.
Does consciousness work in the Fibonacci spiral or in the logarithmic? And
I believe that consciousness works in Fibonacci, and everything that's about us is Fibonacci. We're totally Fibonacci.
So then, potentially the wider our consciousness got in terms of more of a universal mind, the closer we get towards that ideal then, right?
The more closer that we would approach that mathematically. It very rapidly approaches it so quickly that there's just no way to visually see the difference. It doesn't take very long for that thing to expand out there before you just, you can't hardly have an instrument that can detect any difference. Yeah. It's pretty ingenious what we did. It really is. It's an amazing solution to a problem.
I think I might have missed an important transition point, because this whole discussion started upon the square within the circle.
And where are we going on with all this?
We're going with the drawing by Leonardo. It's not placed in the same way, and I don't quite understand how the perfection of all of the mathematics in there can happen when the square is not placed in the same proportion that it was in the original drawing, where it was directly in the center. It's moved down.
Oh, good. Oh, you mean in the original drawing that we start out in the very, very, very beginning?
Exactly, right. It was centered, and then with Leonardo...
Leonardo, that's what I was saying is that You missed an important little piece there. What is the next one in this? This goes back to it? Here it is. the difference in space. This is the center of the circle, right? This is the center of the square. That difference between the navel and the base of the spine is a sacred proportion. It happens to be the distance between the line of your arm, your hand, to the longest finger, which he also drew a line on the wrist showing that. That distance of your hand from there is identical to the same one between your navel and the base of the spine. And that is 1/2 the distance of here. In other words, if you could put that distance above your head, it would hit exactly 1/2, meaning that if you brought the circle down to here, that shape that we started out with would happen. In other words, the perimeter of the square and the circumference of the circle are very, very, very close.
Well, I understand that the sacred proportion that you're talking about. So that was what prompted him to move it down and prove that the geometry still works out perfectly? Because I would think that from the original drawing it would have to be placed perfectly in center, that the square would have to be centered within the circle at all times. The fact that he chose that sacred proportion to bring it down, I don't quite understand how it...
He wanted to show you that this is an important relationship, that when the square is around here, it's centered there, and that when the body will fit inside the circle, that will be centered on there, and that these two meet. That this is an important sacred relationship between the navel and the base of the spine. This is one way of showing that. He did a lot of really subtle things in here. For example, later on, and he did this in a lot of other works too, because he realized that this is true throughout nature. He's showing the energy field of a male. And he actually, as you're going to see a little later, he shows a star tetrahedral field on there. He did it by these simple little lines that you wouldn't, he hid it. But once you bring it out and you see it, it's the tetrahedral field for a man. But he knew that the female was a mirror image. It's an exact mirror image. The female and the male ones are mirror images. In other words, the male has its tetrahedral field like that, where the female has hers like that. It's a mirror image. And so in order to slyly tell you that, he wrote his writing so that the only way you can read it is with a mirror up to it. You have to hold a mirror up here to read this. And he knew that the mirror image extended throughout nature and everything. There was always these mirror images, the mirror images in the minds and all these things. This guy was really brilliant, and they were always secretly hiding everything, and he did it in very subtle ways that are extremely logical once you understand the way he's thinking. It took me a while to figure out how he thought, and after a while you'll see that this simple drawing has a hidden pattern behind it that is incredibly complex, that describes all these energy fields around the body. And the other thing that led me to think that there was really something here is that the mass consciousness around this particular drawing. In other words, we all have a real strong emotional feeling for this. It's being used constantly. It'll flash on a screen for one frame and we pick it up. We won't let go of it. We know that there's something real important here, all of us. We know there's something important, and we're not going to let it go. And yet, this has become one of his most important works, and it was a sketch. It wasn't meant even for public use. I mean, there's the Mona Lisa, which has become important, but this is really more popular than the Mona Lisa. It's reached deeper into our psyche than the very Mona Lisa. Why? Because there's a real powerful truth coming off that page, and we can't help but feel it. And when I unlay all of it, when I show you what he was into totally, I think you'll really know why that it's so powerful for us. We just don't have any choice. It's really important for us. Okay, remember we showed how this grid was here. Well, if you complete the grid, you complete all the lines, that he drew a line in the elbow that came down and just made that, make the line go all the way down. Make them all complete themselves all the way through. And you end up with a grid of 64 squares around the body. The head is one of these squares. The head size is exactly 1/64th of the whole thing that they laid out here. And you realize that it's interesting because now you know that 6 squares in a row like this is a Fibonacci rectangle. And so this is a series. Now the human body's still here. Here's the head, the feet coming across, and the arms coming across, and the feet down here. This is the center of the body, and this is a Fibonacci rectangle coming around here. This is also the blue one stretching up to here is another Fibonacci one. So you have all these Fibonacci rectangles that are in there. There is this thing, and what I'm about to show you could potentially change the planet's life, big time, if it ever gets out, and it's trying to, and it probably won't, because it's too big. But there's a new science coming out in the world. It's about ready to change everything. It'll have more influence if it ever gets out there than anything that's ever hit our planet before. It's called zero-point technology. There are certain places in a sine wave curve that are called zero point. I mean, there's technology out there right now that can replace every single thing that we have, just about, and using nothing but light. Just light, you can do anything. You can do things you can't even think of. And it's all based on, this is one way of looking at it. On a sine wave curve, there are 5 places where 0 point is reached. That's here, 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 here. When we learn how, and we have already learned how, to stop light at these particular places and resume it in patterns at these places, things will be possible that would not normally be possible. This is where creation takes place. This is that place between maleness and femaleness. It's that place between the in-breath and the out-breath in meditation. And geometrically, it looks like this. Because this is the energy field of the grid around the body, or at least one of the earth bodies. We have 2 kinds of vortex energies. There's at least 2. There's 2 basic ones anyway. And one I would give the name of the white light spiral, and the other one the black light spiral. There's also the logarithmic spiral, which is different. And then of course you've got spiraling. There's one going one way and there's one going another way. So you got that gives you 5. And you got 6. I don't know how many there are. I've never thought about it completely, but there's 2 basic kinds. One is white light and the other is black light. A white light spiral is this. Remember that thing where we did 1, 1, 2 using the diagonals as our measuring stick? You start up here in this corner. Here's the center of the body. Here's these 8 places where these spiraling energies that terminate. And in that square, we come up here. And we call this is 1. We make a 90-degree turn and we go 1. The next one is 2, which just hits the edge of this field. The next one is 3. 1, 2, 3, just hits the edge of the field. The next one is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just hits the edge of the field. Leaves exactly at 3 and goes out. So it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, reflects inside the field and leaves. That's the white light spiral. But there's another possibility in there. Instead of starting from up here, you could start from down here. And this one goes 1, 1, 2, right through 0 point. 3 exactly reflects out. Leaves precisely at 2, and if you calculated it, would hit the tip of there exactly. And it's like it's reflecting inside of a cube. The white light is the male. And all of the white light could come this way, but it could also come this way and reflect out. So you have one that could either rotate this way in or rotate this way in. But none of the white light spirals in any of these 8 places are going to even touch this blue area. All of the black light spirals, no matter which way you go, it's going to go 1, 1, 2 out this way, or if it came the other way, 1, 1, 2 this way. And as you look at them all, they're all going to pass right through this one place in the center called 0 point. The male one does not. The female one always passes through 0 point. This is the reason that the male, or the reason that the female only has the womb. This is the technology of the womb, the geometry of the womb. It's the geometry of creation. And so what they're now learning is how to create things right from 0 point. Once you're in 0 point, it's the great void. Anything's possible. Anything at all. And we're just now emerging out to begin to understand this. And science is bulging at the seams trying to figure out how to deal with it. And these, again, can be determined from the human body, from the very energy fields inside the body. These fields, by the way, that come around are really Fibonacci, and when you see them as Fibonacci, they form loop-to-loop patterns of energy, reflecting energies of patterns around the body that can either stay within or leave. They can leave. I don't quite know what all that means yet, and I've always been waiting for them to tell me. I know it has an important aspect in terms of meditation, but I don't know exactly what it means yet. But I figured I would show it anyway. The 0 point technology that we were talking about before has, I'm going to show you right now just the male field. This is the entire male field of the lines of energy that would come off of the human body, just from those 8 places. These are all the male spiraling lines that come out. And I've shown you 4 of the female trackings. So you have one blue spiral coming out like that, one yellow one coming like that. You got I don't know what that is, purple one going like that, and a pink one going out like that. Notice these hearts. A set of hearts facing this way, then a set of hearts facing this way, then another set of hearts facing up this way, and then a bigger set of hearts facing over this way, and they're all at these 90 degrees angles to each other. You're going to see these later on, that they're real important, again, in a lot of the research that's going on. None of them pass through those center 4 squares. That's male. This is the female. And the female, these are all the grid lines coming off of that, and I just tracked 2 of the spiral, the Fibonacci spirals coming off there, and you see a heart facing this way, then a heart facing that way, then a heart facing this way, getting bigger and bigger. This is it's the energy levels of creation itself, both in male and female, and you're just going to have to watch what this means a little later as more things unfold here. Hopefully this will start meaning more and more to you. Okay. Well, only that it is the womb. What the female contains this organ in her, but in the center of that organ is this 0 point place, which is based on this geometries. And that you can, who's that? You said that? Yeah. And that you can, when we talk about the Merkaba, when we talk about some other places, I'll bring back this thing. The Merkaba is just a huge 0 point field that can take you through the great void, but you can create directly from it. Absolutely directly.
What is so important to understand about that 0 point technology? Is it that the whole power of the universe resides in this 0 point?
The 0 point is the great void. It's where it all began.
Where everything becomes possible from that point?
It's where, from that point, a change in something. You could be passing into 0 point. We keep passing through 0 point all the time. Every time we take a breath, we go through 0 point. But usually we pass through it and come right back out the other side with no change, meaning nothing changes. But at 0 point, you can go into it, make a change, and in 1 second, and everything's totally different. Completely different.
So this will have to do with the CDs that you can manifest from the Merkaba point of view?
Yes. You don't need to know it in the kind of detail. Again, like I said, you don't need to know this. You just need to know about it. You know.
In other words, you can manifest anything if you know how to do the shift as you go through the void, through the with your breath.
Once
maybe.
you go into 0 point through the Merkaba, then it is possible then to completely heal your body instantly of anything.
By following your breath.
Just for an example.
How do you know when you go through the void and you do the switch when to do it?
You'll know. I'll talk about it. You'll know for sure.
When we go to the next level of consciousness, our shape changes. We get taller, necks get longer, possibly.
That's right, though I haven't talked about that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the same ratios...
Yeah,
where
sure.
our waistline is up to our chest, we still have the same ratio?
Well, not necessarily that they would. In this body, the phi ratio is between the feet and here and there. If you were to look at the phi ratios in a Syrian body, they're still going to be there, but it may be that the navel is in the phi ratio to the knees or something else or like that, that kind of ratio. I haven't studied that body, so I don't know. But it's just like looking at any other body. The same is going to be true of any extraterrestrial anywhere. It's all the same laws. It's the same everywhere. I just don't know what it is because I haven't. You got to mathematically sit down and work it out. Yeah.
Did you say that the Fibonacci spiral has no beginning and no end?
No, it has a beginning.
Has a beginning.
It starts at 1.
Okay.
Or you could say it starts at 0.
But the golden mean does not?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It potentially has no beginning or no end. If you're moving down it, if you're moving down a theoretical one, you would never find the end. If you're moving out, you'd never find the end. Whereas if you're moving out a Fibonacci one, you would never find the end, possibly. But if you're moving in, you would definitely come to the place where it began. If you study vortex mechanics, and there is a man named Walter Baumgartner, if you really want to know what it's all about. He was the head of the Walter Russell schools. I just think I just put his name on the list here recently. But he gives outstanding workshops on vortex mechanics. They're outstanding. And just 1 second. And what happens is if you have a vortex of a logarithmic spiral, it will just keep going in and in and in and compressing and compressing and compressing and compressing. If you have a Fibonacci spiral coming in, it will come in and in and in and in and in and in. And when it gets to 1, it will click over. It will come back over here. It will go 5, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. And so it'll go like that. It'll just come right back. It'll reverse polarity relative to itself. So even though it's male, everything's got a male and a female, and so one of those is going to be male, and then it's going to be coming out the opposite one, the female, whichever it is. Or if it's rotating in this way, then it'll still come back out the opposite polarity, going out the other way. And so that has a different kind of effect than something that's just going in like this. his works are amazing. He's got some of the things. He's got most of his work is with water, and he's got water wants to rotate in a very specific spiraling energy, and he's got a glass tube in the exact way that water wants to run. And all it is gravity fed, with its water just moving down this small glass tube in exactly the way. But because it's moving exactly the way it wants to, it creates all this energy. And you can hold this light bulb up next to it, it's not even touching it, and it turns it on. It's really pretty good. He's got another one where he's got the vortex energy, probably logarithmic, because the energy moves in, and it moves in so small that the water, when it comes out, it's just like one molecule attached to the other. It's just like this little thin knife, and it'll cut right through steel. It's just water, and it'll right through steel.
But my question was about free energy machine, which I believe he is also working with. And is it related to this illustration here on the board?
Yes. All your free energies are related to this or to 0 point. And that's, you can either look at it like that, or you can look at it like the geometry. But they don't know the geometry. All the people, at least all the people I know are working at, they're thinking of it more along this line, and in rotating fields, which are based upon Merkaba. They're basically Merkaba sciences that they're trying to develop, connecting in with tachyon or fourth dimensional prana energy to bring it in from there. And though everybody's trying to get these free energy machines, they already got free energy machines, and we can't use them.
But I think you said it in the video that they were already being manufactured in India.
That's right. Not manufactured.
No?
They've already, India and Germany have already created both the in-machine and Adam Trombley's one also, which is another one other than the in-machine, both of which are over-unity generators, and both of them based on rotating fields of energy, different principles, but they work. But nobody can use them. You've got all this technology. There's tons of technology. There's so much technology out there right now. It's amazing stuff. You can't bring it out. You can't use it.
Why? I don't understand.
Because if we did, everybody dies. That's why. We all die. We haven't been able to figure out how to do it. Huh? Oh, well, yeah, but it's money that stops. See, it's money. We're all talking about money. If you bring out free energy machine, they've got them. So you got this little machine about so big, you plug your house into it, and you got free electrical energy for the rest of your life. There's no moving parts, or there, in one case, in atoms, it's a disk rotating with magnetic bearings in a vacuum, so nothing wears out ever. What would happen to the world? How many countries would be destroyed utterly and completely? How many millions of people would die overnight?
Why? I don't understand that.
Because what would happen to all the oil companies, all the oil countries, all the Arabs and Saudi Arabia, and all that stuff like that, and a lot of other Mexico and all the people that are producing oil? Wham! In a short period of time, oil would be worthless, absolutely worthless. What would happen to all the oil companies in the United States and all the impact and all of that stuff? You would be amazed what would happen. See, I thought a long time ago, too, when I got into this, okay, let's get out here and do this. And so we invented 200 and something inventions. All of them were on Star Trek level. We could do things you wouldn't even believe what we could do. And it isn't stuff we say we could do. We could prove it. We got the machines. We could do it. We could do a lot of things. And but what happens when you try to put these out? No matter what you try to put out, you're going to be hurting somebody somewhere in a big time way, with most things anyway. And the more powerful impact it has on the world, the more powerful it has. Supposing that you had a little light that would heal any kind of disease you can think of, just supposing there was such a device, then what would happen to the United States if that was released in the United States? it doesn't matter if they believe it. What if I had something that could just, okay, next? Then what would happen? You would have the American Medical Association would go bankrupt. You might say good, but we would all be out of business. We would all be destroyed by it, because it would be like if General Motors collapsed. If General Motors collapsed, we're all going to feel that real big time. You know, we're already feeling it because it has been dying slowly, and we're already in the United States beginning to feel, you know, daily the impact of what this means. But what happens if all of a sudden all the banks in the United States close in the same day?
So we won't need money because we don't have to pay for energy or health care or food.
Right, if we could ever get to that side. But right now we're addicted to these other sides, and there's people that will do anything to keep the financial status quo the same because of fear and a lot of other reasons. Yes, I know they are. But when you start talking about these technological levels and all the devices and things, nevertheless, you may not be alive if they. You won't be alive if the people. I know that. I understand that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just telling you what the problem is with the people that are out there that have these inventions. There's a guy who used vortex mechanics to create a tube that's about 30 feet long that would suck in it anything and break it down into about 2 micron sizes. And then as it moved along the tube, which never touched the sides of the tube, would move like magic down this tube and come out the other end. Instead, it would dump it into according to its atomic weight. And so you could take garbage and stick this tube toward the ground where you got a garbage dump. It would pull 200 tons of garbage, including the earth and everything else, through this tube at the rate of 200 tons an hour, and it would come out in all these little piles, which happen to be all the elements of industry. Solve a lot of problems, wouldn't it? Yeah. He brought this to L.A., and you could put 2 of these, one of them on the back of a big semi-truck, and drive these into L.A. 2 of them could process all the garbage in L.A., and instead of costing $80 million a year that L.A. is spending, they could make money off the garbage because it's in very usable form with no garbage, nothing, not a single thing left over at all. And he said, he figured, okay, no problem, let's do this. And they said, and he was immediately greeted with this goon squad that said, if you even think about doing this, you're dead. Get out of here. Why? Because it was the mafia that holds the garbage there, and they want that $80 million a year. Even though they can make more money the other way, they don't want change. They want this money coming in the way it is right now, and they don't want to change anything. And his life was threatened, and so he ended up having to go to China to get out of here, and they're trying to develop it in China now. And I've seen this time and time again. Like, for example, many years ago, we had invented 2 light bulbs made on a technology that they just have rediscovered in the last year or so. But we had discovered this back in 1970. And 2 of these light bulbs would light up Yankee Stadium brighter than daylight. And they would go for thousands and thousands of hours, 20,000 hours or something like that, and they cost like $25. And so we were going to figure, well, let's make light bulbs that will last forever, you know. We can make little ones, big ones, and they do all this stuff. And they don't take hardly any energy because they're based on totally different principles. They're based on radio waves rather than heating this thing. And General Electric found out that we were going to do this, and we thought they were going to be real happy and want to buy these and all that stuff. And they came in. My partner was in the other room. I did not hear them say this, but General Electric went up to them and said, "We want to buy your light bulb." And he goes, "No, we really want to do this ourselves." And he goes, "Well, we'll give you a lot of money for it and all that stuff like that." And they said, "No, we really want to do this." And then they just quickly said, "We'll give you $1.5 million tomorrow morning or you're dead." And they walked out. They weren't kidding. He knew they weren't kidding. He sold it to them. General Electric shelved it. Because these banks of light bulbs that are in all these stadiums and everything only last like 25 hours or something. And they cost a lot of money. And it's millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it would have just been totally wiped out. And so this was reinvented recently by someone else, outside of General Electric, obviously, who you now can buy these light bulbs. They finally got it out. And then I was reading the statement by it, and I said, aha, they finally figured this one out again. It took 20 years. And they came down here and they asked General Electric what they thought about it. And General Electric says, oh, we had invented that many, 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 many years ago, but we thought that nobody would want it, so we just kept it. They admitted that they had it. And it's all bull. Huh? It finally happened, yeah. But they waited for 22 years that they were making probably $50 million a year for 22 years.
So essentially what you're saying is that if circumstances accelerate at the pace they're going, the whole banking system and the government have to break down before any of this new technology could be established?
I don't know that for sure, but we would have to cooperate. There would have to be a world cooperation. There would have to be a lot of love happening, which we don't have right now. And so a lot of the fear could go away, at which point, if there was cooperation, it could be done in such a way that the technology could come out without people being hurt. In other words, give the invention to the oil companies of the free energy machines so that they can distribute them, so that they could replace their oil with this new invention that would generate the same kind of funds but wouldn't wipe them out. But you've got to do something like that. If you don't do something like that, you're going to have a war. You will continue to have wars. As soon as you try to take away some country's total ability to survive, they'll do anything to get you. Anything at all. If they have to blow up an atomic bomb in New York City, they'll do that. They'll do whatever it takes. Anything. Anything at all. It doesn't matter. Anything at all.
So you let them decide what's going to happen instead of you?
No, but this is the kind of world we live in. This is what I finally realized after a long time. It took me a long time. I was really innocent going, let's save the planet. And the planet doesn't want to be saved. I mean, it would like to be saved, but not if it means they're going to lose their money. And, same way with President Bush. We had this thing in Rio, and President Bush didn't even want to go to that because he was afraid of getting trapped into some situation where he would have to sign something saying that he would have to reduce some of the emissions or something else like that, which would cause millions of jobs in the United States. And we were already in a recession, and he didn't want to do it. Nobody wants to be the first one to be hurt or to have the pain happen to them. Because the only way we're going to get out of this thing, if we're not thinking of any fourth dimensional levels or any other stuff going on, is we're going to have to, somebody's going to have to make some changes, and somebody's going to have to be some compromises and gifts. But we do have the technology that could heal almost all, if not all, of the environmental problems, and very rapidly. Though some of them now have gone beyond the beyond. We could have done it a few years ago. Some of them are now so far gone that I don't even know if we have the technology to be able to solve them at this point. Well, I can't, from my point of view, I don't see any other answer, and I've really looked in other ways. And if anybody's got an answer, I don't care if I'm wrong. I mean, if you can find a way to heal this planet, though I think that there's something outside of the system that's even greater than this that's common, that's going to force us to leave here anyway. But
so from the fourth dimension, when we go through this polar shift, is Earth itself going to be re-inhabited by those of us who've made it through to come back with greater technology?
No, we won't need technology. The whole thing with technology, I think, should be left for a little while, because until I get to the place where I can really talk about where technology came from and what it's all about. Because there is technology is not our friend. It is the problem. Yes.
Secret is in God-centered technology.
That's correct. That's right. The living fields of life based upon our connection to all life.
This is why I'm here. And I'm sure this is why everyone else is here. And this is the kind of thing that moves. You can do things alchemically.
That's right.
That you would never be able to do otherwise.
This is exactly.
And you can utilize regular technology with God-centered technology to create all kinds of things that you would never begin to dream. 51% is passing in metaphysical kinds of things that I've learned. Not only that, but 5% will change a whole population.
Yeah, I think it's 7 actually.
Well, to really, I suppose, solidify it, but then that's about as much that takes a magnet to charge it. But it works with the population.
Because in advertising, as soon as you reach 7% of the population, the next morning, 100% of the population knows your product.
This is how we're going to be moving, and this is what's been demonstrated in these isolated incidents of the things that have happened. So it is happening already all around us, and it'll be accelerated because the energies have accelerated.
Yeah. But we've got to go in the internal direction, because to try to find a technology to heal the problems of technology, though it seems like an answer in a way, as we get deeper and deeper into this thing about technology, I think you'll maybe come up with the same conclusion I have. It's just an illusion. We just keep getting deeper and deeper into the technology. I've seen technologies with my eyes that are so clean, so beautiful, so awesome, that you would think they would be the greatest thing in the world. At least I thought it was. And then I had the angels come to me and say, nope, not the way it goes. I mean, I was taken aboard a Syrian ship. This is about a 50-mile-long ship, and they led me through the whole thing. I spent 3 days on it. And it was, the whole inside of the ship was white. The outside, the exterior was black. And there was no moving parts anywhere. There was no electrical circuits. There was no nothing. It was just, it looked like an art gallery. All there was were these moving shapes of white. It looked like art forms. And the people simply psychotronically connected with these different shapes and was able to do anything. And when I came back from that experience, I expressed my thing to the angels, saying, this is incredible stuff. This is the most advanced thing I've ever seen. And the angel said to me, no, you're not right. I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, that's amazing. They go, no. And they said to me, supposing you're in your house and you get cold, and so you say to yourself, I'm going to invent a heater. And so you invent a heater, and whatever it is, it could be a free energy heater. It doesn't matter what it is, how sophisticated it is. You invent something to heat your room, and it heats your room, and it works. And you think you just got better off. But from their point of view, what you just did was give your innate power to an object. And you're now weaker, and you're addicted to the object. You now have to have this object. And so as the technology keeps growing, you make lights, and you do this, and you do this, and you keep going on and on and on and on. As an individual, as a God-centered individual, you get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker until finally you can't live without the technology. When you could have you could have heated the room in the first place just with the Merkaba, with your own energies, with your connection to God. And so what they said is the more advanced the technology becomes, the more separated from God they become, and the weaker as a race they become. And later we will talk about this when we talk about the Lucifer Rebellion, because the Lucifer Rebellion is totally based on the difference between a living Merkaba field and an external technological field, which we call UFOs, or flying ships. But I got to I really want to lay down a whole lot more information before we go into that too deeply. And it is a real important subject because it's the keynote of what our problem is here. But I did get real involved in this stuff, and I really did try to put some of this technology out. I mean, there's so many things that were I thought could really help. But I first had this experience maybe 20 years ago, and they told me all this stuff. And then in the meantime, as time went on, I completely forgot. And I got totally wrapped up in science again. And I started doing everything they told me not to do. And they never said a word. They waited until about 2 years ago. And then they gave me a very interesting experience, which I'll tell you about, which overnight changed my whole mind about everything. And I walked away from the scientists. I had all this stuff going. I had incredible things going. And I just said, see you later. And I walked away because I realized that there's only one way. For me, maybe not for you, but for the only way for me is I got to figure out how to do this on my own, completely 100%, without any kind of stuff. And I know we're still addicted to cars and things like this, but I'm not going to add to it. If anything, I'm going to try to keep subtracting from it and try to figure out how I can get to the place where I can do this on my own. But we really do need to wait till I lay down more information here to make this whole problem that we have, the whole parameters of the problem, clear.
So the solution is to learn that zero-point technology, no?
Internally, not to apply it in some time, but external. See, most people are taking it and applying it into science. But you can do anything that science can do on any level whatsoever, and more, because science has its limits, and we don't. Anything whatsoever can be done internally from ourselves. And if we can learn to do the things, and we begin by just doing very simple things. It's like, we didn't learn to run 100 yards in 6 seconds or whatever it is by, when we were little. We first learned how to stand up and take a walk, and so take that first step. And for me, there are certain things that we can do to just begin to learn the power of our own selves. And that's what this is what it's all about. But it's not easy. I mean, we're so addicted to this. Look at, we're merged in it. We're in a building. This is technology. Everything. But look.
Would it be possible for us to live without eating?
Oh, you won't eat after this. Once you get...
That's one of
Are you hungry right now? Throw that man an apple or something.
It's one of our problems, you see. we have to eat. But I know that some of us, like the masters in the Far East, for example, there was a wonderful book called Lives and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. And they seem to live on the prana. They don't eat anymore. We
didn't eat before we fell. And in fact, that was one of the first signs that the Ascended Masters knew that we had really, how far down we had fallen when we all started eating food again.
They seem to be able to make a bubble, for example, of protection for the night and be very comfortable in the middle of a storm.
It's the understanding of the Merkaba. If you're in the Merkaba and you got it rotating, you could stay warm and everything, all your needs, whatever they are, completely satisfied without doing anything, without having anything at all. You don't have to sit there and get dripping wet. You just have the water just go right around your field.
Can you teach us how to do that?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Drunvalo, you said that we've all done this before, created our Merkabas, and it's just a matter of remembering?
Yeah, this is everything I'm saying to you is nothing new.
Okay.
Though it may seem new. You know all of this. That's why it's interesting to you. You already know what I'm talking about.
Well, if we have done this before and created this Merkaba, is this something that's
waiting to be reunited, or is it something that we're creating from inside ourselves again, or do we hang it up somewhere and incarnate?
Your Merkaba, you see, you have this field sitting around your body, right out at your fingertips, in the electromagnetic field, which I'm trying to describe to you right now. And that one is connected to other ones and other ones, and there's a whole series of nested geometrical forms that go out to about maybe roughly this far away from a human being. A big whole series of them. And what was the question? I got one over there and forgot what I was doing. I need that apple real bad.
If we did it before,
yeah,
and we forgot it when we incarnated, is it something we jumpstart to get going again, or is it sitting somewhere waiting to be realized?
Well, the fields are sitting there, and they're all there. There's actually 3 sets of these fields that are superimposed over each other. 3 identical fields. All we have to do is remember how to begin to activate it, which is breathing the prana down through the pineal gland, coming out, activating the field in that kind of way, and beginning the rotating process. So that you have one set that will rotate this way. An entire set like this. It will begin to rotate like that. The one that rotates to your left, counterclockwise, is male in nature. It's electrical, and it is literally your mind. It's knowledge. And the one that rotates this way, which is an entire set, just like you see going there, is female. It's magnetic in nature, and it is literally your emotional body. And so when you happen to have just the right thoughts rotating this way, and just the right emotions rotating this way, then this phenomena takes place, which is called the Merkaba. And so that's why it just takes remembering how to do it, what it was about. The field is set up, and then the testing of the field to see that it's really real. And once the mind, and then once you have just even one experience, just one, you will never be the same again. Just recently had someone who called up and who put her arm through a door, right through the wall. She obviously will never be the same. Or another person who was sitting there and suddenly lifted off the floor and went from, I think it was in the living room, into the kitchen. Levitated into the kitchen. She's never going to be the same. I mean, really, you're not going to be the same. It's just like, that's it. You realize that everything you ever told was just not true. and that there's a lot more to life. And so, but there's no one that can do that but you. And I've had a similar experience myself, and I've had a few other ones now that I know what the possibilities are.
Does this only happen in the physical awareness, or is it possible to experience this maybe in dream time as well?
Well, you can remember what it was all about in dream time. Like in dream time, you may remember yourself flying, because that's the other thing you could do, is you can just lift off and fly with Merkaba. You could do it that way, or you could just simply disappear here and reappear where you want to be. The potential is directed by intention and what's possible. But you just have to, I mean, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. We're not quite, these are the kinds of things we'll be talking about on the last day. We got to wait until we get there. I know, we're all ready, let's go. Nobody wants to be here anymore, I know. It's that way all over the world. I mean, everybody's fed up with it. So, who wants this? You know, it's really...
I used to teach this in the monasteries in Tibet.
Oh, yeah. Sure. This is what, in Tibet, the final test was after you had done 108,000 prostrations and thrown your mala beads against all the walls and the temples, and you walked around all the mountains, and you'd done all the various things. And when you got really, really old and you're almost ready to die, then they told you what it was all about. Maybe they would tell you, and what they would, and then they would tell you what it was, and then they would see if it was really, if you could really do it, and they would set you on a ledge out there that's maybe 30,000 feet in the air, it's 100 below zero, and you're freezing and everything like that. And they'd take all your clothes off, and they'd put wet blankets around you, and they'd say, dry them. And that guy, of course, would very quickly sit in there and start doing his breathing and get on all the fields. Pop that baby out there. It's 80 degrees in here, which would only be just inside the Merkaba shape, which looks like a flying saucer, would instantly be 80 degrees, if that's what he set it for. And very quickly, you would see a circle of snow melt in the circle around this person. And very quickly, he would dry these blankets and stand up. And he would demonstrate in real time to his teacher that he had done this. And Omni Magazine just videoed this. Yeah, they were allowed to video it. They sat there and watched one of these guys do it. They allowed them. They would have never allowed this before, but we're ready. I mean, we're ready for this stuff. And they said, watch this. And he just did it. No. I don't know whatever's going to... I never know what they're going to have me do. I don't know what's going to happen. But this is where we're heading. This is possible. This is real stuff. And this is nothing compared to where we're going. Because where we're going is we're going to... That's nothing. We're going to create the very universe we're in, second by second, and everything in it. Which is a lot farther than just creating an orange in your hand.
Is that the reason, like, if some of us have memories of that and we could do it before, but we would have to come back now and wait for this time in order to change?
No, I mean, that's everyday stuff on higher levels. Just down here, why you ended up here, I don't know. Most of you are probably coming from higher dimensional levels and have a reason for being here. But when you come in here, then you've got to become part of it, like me, and everyone else. You become part of it, and you forget. You got to start over like everybody else. But you usually very quickly come back to this place where you start remembering, and we're all starting to remember, and people everywhere are starting to remember. This is happening everywhere. It's great. There will come a time, I know, I can feel it, I can see it about to happen, when all of a sudden, everybody in the world is just going to go, yeah! and it's over. That's it. It's just over. It could be over in just a second. The dream that we're in, this nightmare kind of that we're in, can just be over, just like that. And all the problems. What's an environmental problem like a dirty ocean? What is... Big deal. If Christ could turn water into wine, you don't think a whole planet full of Christ beings could, just like that with the ocean, solve all the problems. The whole environment would just transform into harmony because it's just light. The truth is, it's just light, and it is intimately connected to our thoughts and our feelings. And what we think and what we feel and our intentions are set. But what's going on out here is you've got people like in Israel who are intentionally hating someone else, who is intentionally hating back, who is intentionally hating that, and creating the worlds that continues on. And that pattern, those kinds of patterns have got to be broken. That's where the problem lies, not in trying to solve the environment. It's consciousness problems that are on the earth. Once we can get to the proper level in the consciousness problems, then all of this other stuff is solved like that. Just like that.
But wouldn't we have to get permission to fix things for those people who are so busy hating?
We can't. No, that's the thing, is we can't do that. You can't go around, even once you get to the level where you realize that you can make certain changes, you also realize the responsibility on other levels, and you can't go doing those things. And the only real source of change that you've got is yourself. And so if you can change yourself, where all you're doing is emitting love, then that's the beginning of the cure. And that truly influences other people. And it goes into the grids, and this 100th monkey theory thing is not just a theory, it's very, very real. It's been proven scientifically, which I will talk about when we talk about the grids. And a few people can change the world. It can change things. You know, Mother Mary used to ask people, pray for peace, pray for peace. But we never knew what praying meant. Praying just doesn't mean asking God. It means changing yourself into that which you want to see become and happen, and making it real. And
but all those studies, don't you, where they sent meditators into war zones and stop the wars. I mean, they've got tons of documentation on this.
Yeah. It only takes a few people. But instead, what we're doing now is we're trying to use very specific external Merkabas to use mind control, which they used in the Iraqi war, which works. I mean, that war was not an ordinary war. If you noticed, suddenly all these people just dropped their weapons and gave up. They gave up because of the mind control saying, you're to surrender, you're to surrender, which was all based on the technology they learned in the Montauk experiments. But a higher way of doing that would be doing what you're saying, is sending in soldiers of love to say, you know, it's okay, it's all right. In other words, instead of having them surrender to capture them or anything like that, to say, not to surrender, let's just stop. But we're getting there. We're getting close. I mean, we really are. But the time from here on out, from 1993 on out for the next few years, is going to be, each year is going to get more and more and more extraordinary on all kinds of levels. The polarities could keep getting greater and greater, and yet